Casey Jones, the man, myth, and legend known throughout the railroading world, but known best in the United States as the Brave Engineer. It is no surprise Walt Disney, being the master storyteller of the age, would eventually find the time to produce a film to present to the public this great American story. Not only is The Brave Engineer a superb cartoon, but it also reflects the zeitgeist of post-World War II America. First, one must understand the reason behind the production of this short subject animation. 1950. World War II has come to an end, but the European market for the Walt Disney Studio and other film studios in general was closed. As such, during wartime, Walt pivoted to the production focused primarily for the American audience, hence films such as Melody Time, The Three Caballeros, and Victory Vehicles. Like Melody Time with Johnny Appleseed, Walt looked to thoroughly American icons and stories to be the subjects of his films. One such icon was American legend John Luther Jones, better known as Casey Jones, the brave engineer who in 1900 sacrificed himself to save the lives of all the passengers on the Cannonball. Casey Jones transcended railroading lore from that point onward and forever became associated with American character for doing his duty for fellow Americans. Therefore, his story as an American legend was perfect for the American audiences. In addition to being a hero of the rails, Casey Jones's story acts as a parallel to the goals of the U.S. for the Cold War. As will be seen throughout the cartoon, Jones must endure multiple exploits in order to complete his charged task. Thusly, Walt was illustrating, quite literally, the U.S. would be able to succeed in overcoming the communist threat of the Soviet Union. And now, to the cartoon. The cartoon opens in a rail yard somewhere back east when Jones is tasked with bringing the Western Mail to San Francisco. Naturally, as is with all self-respectable railroads, he must do so in a timely manner on schedule. The cartoon from the very beginning makes light of Jones's tendency to be an envelope pusher by traveling at or above speed restrictions with his trains and causes much havoc for the yardmaster in the signal box to make sure Casey gets to the main line without hitting parked consists or other moving trains. From there he goes through a flood, shoos away a cow on the line, saves a damsel in distress, re-rails his entire train after a trestle bridge is blown up, wards off train robbers, keeps his engine together when she is on the brink of having a boiler explosion, and something we shall save for later. Let us now focus on some of the details of animation design and the exploits that delayed Casey in his trek to the Western land. Besides Casey himself, the star of the cartoon is his locomotive. Those familiar with Casey Jones would know he was operating an Illinois Central Railroad passenger train from Memphis, Tennessee to Canton, Mississippi on the night of the fatal crash. In the film, Casey Jones operates a mail train west on an unidentified railroad. The train, to make for easier animation, was shortened significantly from a long consist of passenger cars to a mail car and a caboose. The engine itself is significantly different in design, not just for ease of animation, but for possibly two significant reasons. The engine involved with the crash was Illinois Central Railroad 382, a 460 10-wheeler and very up-to-date. In the film, Casey Jones operates a 440 American with diamond stack. This may have been because the American-type locomotive was the most produced engine, with 80% of all engines in the U.S. being of the configuration by the 1890s, and cements the idea of the American way triumphing over the communist takeover attempt. Another reason could have been the artist's way of referencing Walt's little hobby of his backyard Carrollwood Pacific Railroad engine, Lily Bell, another 440. Now, for an analysis of the memorable exploits within the film. The typical damsel in distress, tied to the rails by the dastardly villain, is your average blue-eyed blonde and could be significant of the gender norms of the time on display, where the strong man comes to the rescue of the helpless female. However, this is an artistic interpretation of Jones's heroism in 1895, where he braced himself to the front of a moving locomotive to save a little girl in the middle of the tracks.
Curses! Foil the game!
The next exploit of note was the destruction of the trestle bridge. Make note of the characterization of the one who
wrecks a train on a hillside is not on the level.
He appears to be of Eastern European descent, or, undoubtedly, a Russian immigrant. Take for your consideration Tsar Ivan IV, better known as Ivan the Terrible. Long broom beard and beady eyes with pale skin complexion. This could obviously be a reference to the communist Soviets attempting to derail the American trek to maintain democracy and the American way of life. But Thanks to the perseverance of the brave engineer, the American type engine does without the bridge and goes on as if nothing really happened. Immediately afterwards is the traditional threat of train robbers in the Wild West. At first it would seem to fit the traditional cliché, but pay close attention to Casey Jones's removal of the robbers.
Take that, and that, and that, and that, and that, and that, and that. Time out. Substitution. Take this, and this, and this, and this, and this, and this. Everybody off! Everybody off! What?
These bandits are just that,
Hey, Casey.
bandits.
What's happening?
But they are really banditos. The Mexican community had already suffered the disgrace of repatriation during the 1930s, but then came the Bracero program from 1942 to 1964. As this film was released in 1950, it is evident the stereotyping of the day influenced the portrayal of the train robbers. As with the Western films like The Treasure de Sierra Madre, Mexicans had been subject to the strengthening stereotypes of the Bracero program as being associated with illegality and criminality. Hence the Mexican presence in Western films, and in this cartoon, is reserved for the bandito. There is also a notable absence in the film that delineates from reality, the fireman Sim Webb. With almost every steam locomotive ever created, it has a two-man crew to successfully operate an engine. One to cause the engine to move, and the other to maintain the steam in the boiler by tending to the fire and water. Truth to say, it seems more likely the fireman duties were relegated to Casey in the cartoon for ease of animation and to portray him as even more heroic and legendary. But had it not been for Casey's fireman Sim Webb, his story would have completely gone unknown for history's record. The final exploit to consider is Casey's final, the wreck. In the cartoon, Casey's near-explosive engine is barreling towards a double-headed freight, possibly a Central Pacific train on the Sierra Nevada mountain range. In reality, Casey saw a parked train in front of him, slammed on the brakes, threw the engine in reverse, and slowed his train down as much as he could to dampen the severity of the impact for which he gave his life. In the cartoon, the two trains crash head-on, and all seems lost for the Western Mail. However, straying from reality is Casey surviving the wreck and fulfilling his charge of bringing the mail to San Francisco. This illustrates the power of American might overcoming anything that may come within its path, especially communism. The Brave Engineer is a great animation that is almost timeless, but, taken collectively, it is a piece of culture reflective of the zeitgeist in American history. America sought for heroes to defeat the Soviets. There were still norms towards gender with men as the savior and women as the one in need of saving. Racial stereotypes were still prevalent in mass culture, and history would sometimes be abridged for the sake of easy comprehension and entertainment value. However, The Brave Engineer is still a magnificent piece of true Walt-approved Disney animation with wonderful artistry from Freddie Moore and Milt Kahl and, of course, trains.